Service Lab is a community of service design doers and the service design curious. We meet up every few months to share our learnings with each other.
So I'm Lucy. It's nice to be in a room with a regular size-shaped head. I'm from Snook, and
I'm Becky. I'm from Policy Lab in a cabinet office in government.
And we are here to talk about the design and climate community that we're building together with a number of other designers in hopes of incorporating the environment into every stage of our process.
So we all know the science. Our house is on fire. We've heard it so many times. And it's really at the heart of it like a social justice issue as well, which often kind of doesn't always get talked about on the surface. But it kind of drives to the core of kind of how the whole system works on a planetary and human level. And frustratingly, kind of the pace and the ambition from government and business can feel quite slow. But that said, it also feels like we're reaching a kind of a tipping point, particularly from the citizen movements that we've seen in like the last less than a year, really. It almost feels like sometimes I have to pinch myself to hear the headlines on the radio, like we hear it every day now, which is kind of quite encouraging at the same time as scary. And with that as well, so, you know, kind of Fridays for the Futures, the Extinction Rebellion campaigns, Greta Thunberg, we're all quite aware of that now. And there were also like small creeping signs of change and hope even in the last week that have kind of started to come out of government, like the new Environment Bill and the Office for Environmental Protection, which has been proposed. So those are kind of little bits of good news, and we're trying to like look at ourselves in the mirror as well as designers and really try to understand what the design community's role is and all of that as well, if we're kind of actors in this kind of democratic system that we're working within.
But I think what we can probably all agree on is that the current system is broken, both environmentally and socially, and we probably need a collective rethink about what it means to be human, living on planet Earth, and how we treat our planet and each other. And I think we really believe, and we hope you do too, that design can really help to address this issue. And if we mobilize together, it's kind of amazing to think of what the impact that we can have. But I think what we're learning in kind of building this movement is that we have a long way to go. But hopefully if we do it together, we can get there a little bit quicker, which considering the timescales is probably needed. I'm going to tell you a little bit about where this came from, and a big shout out to my colleagues Ness, Zoë and Izzy up in Snook's Glasgow studio. Ness is the one in the foregrounds, but Ness and I really kind of came together 2 years ago with a mutual interest about what design can do to shape a more sustainable future. And through that, wrote a series of blog posts and ran a Dotty event. For those of you that don't know Dotty, it's about design on the inside, about how can design help create a more sustainable future. And within that, we had a group discussion with the audience about how do we create a movement and hold each other accountable for really addressing this issue within our practice. And then we went and did it. And we did it with a group that we're calling Design and Climate. And you can follow along with what we're doing by using this hashtag. And really this was a response to our need for really thinking that we have a collective responsibility as citizens and as designers to do our part to spark urgency, influence conversations, commissioning, design and delivery towards addressing this crisis. And really we think as designers that we have some really influential levers for change, which is our practice, so actually what we do as designers and the services that we design, specifically as a service design community, how we work with clients and are able to shape and influence those conversations, and what we do together. I've never worked in a profession where there's actually so much kind of collaboration and cohesion. There's a lot of support that we offer for each other, and I think that really lends itself to the community that we're trying to build. But really what we're trying to do is change our practice to incorporate the environment at every single stage of the process. And we're really experimenting with that and hoping that you'll join us along the way.
So we'll kind of briefly talk you through what's happened so far. Some of you will have been part of that story already. So we started off as Lucy mentioned, with the kind of original Dotty event that some of you may have been at, which kind of kickstarted the whole thing. After that, there was a bunch of people who kind of wanted to take this on and keep that conversation going. So at the beginning of the summer, there was a second event where we invited people to get together and really kind of like bash out what the opportunities might be in kind of your kind of bog standard-ish design process, and just start kind of seeing where the opportunities might lie in that. We shared that back with a Trello board online as well to kind of keep that conversation really open as we could. And then the second end of the summer, we ran another event in London where we dove in, we kind of did a more of a deeper dive into the beginning part of the design process, really like how you start having that conversation in your organisation with your clients. And that was also kind of repeated up in Glasgow where Snook have their other studio. So again, we're trying to like keep the conversation as wide as possible and make sure that it's an inclusive movement. So those are the kind of main meetups we've had so far. And we've had 175 people kind of sign up online to be part of this, and multiple agencies involved as well. And we've really found like the face-to-face meetups have been really key as well. Probably others of you like who are here now, like these face-to-face meetups are really key to kind of build those like personal connections where collaborations might happen and conversations spark. So, yeah. Yeah, and so I guess that touches on that point. We want to keep it really practical as well. So throughout those meetups, we've been kind of like coming up with ideas, but we've also been encouraging people to like go out and like test stuff straight away. So we, in the meetup where we were talking about how to start the conversation, we had kind of like people saying what they'd already done and coming up with ideas about how that might happen, and then inviting people to like go away and come back next time, share on the Trello board like what they did, whether they wrote a blog or literally like, you know, what were the words that you used, who did you approach, and how did you start that conversation, and trying to share those learnings and act on it straight away, because we're quite aware that these things can be a bit of a talking shop. So really encouraging people and giving people permission to just go and try it, because we haven't got time to kind of wait for someone else to do it anymore.
So what have we done in these meetups? And there's only been 3, but there's actually been quite a lot of activity that's gone on behind the scenes in doing those. And I think part of what we've done as well is within these workshops that we've run is recognize that there are many that have come before us. So the Trello board, which we'll kind of show you a little bit after this presentation, actually just has a resource bank. It's turned into a resource bank with other tools that other agencies globally have done that actually help designers incorporate the environment and the climate into their practice. And I think for us, we want to be very respectful to that. Many people have been working on this for many, many years, so to bulldoze in here and be like, we have the answers, is definitely not what we're trying to do. And really, respect that. And I think do what we do best as service designers, which is adopt and adapt things and apply it to our practice and experiment and test, and importantly, share learnings. But there's an awful lot out there, and we're hoping that this community can start to bring that together and filter it in a way that we can use it a little bit more proactively. We're also thinking, we're basically what we're realizing is that we're at this very basic point of working with clients, is that there's just simple questions that we can ask them that we need to ask them, because based on my experience, and it'd be interesting to hear on yours, actually bringing the climate up is still a bit of a taboo within projects. And it unnerves me a little bit when the science says we've got 10 years and yet this is where we're at in reality. And but this is actually part of the reality of where we're at, which is where does it make sense to introduce the environment into a conversation? Is it at your kind of initial scoping meeting with a client? Like, do you care about this? Maybe not. Maybe it depends on the client. Is it at your kickoff meeting? Is it somewhere down, way further down the process? I guess the point is bringing it up and raising it as a point of conversation is probably a really good place to start. How does it make sense to introduce it? This is stuff that we're experimenting with as a community. And we really want community members to record what happened. I brought it up in a project kickoff and it failed miserably, and now the client doesn't trust me. That's cool. We can try and do it again, maybe a different way. But I think really this community is about applying some of the applications that we feel are needed, testing and learning from them, and then bringing it back so we can build it up together. Because this is all really new for some, maybe not for others, but certainly, again, from my experience, it's definitely new to a number of clients that we've been working with. So in one of our workshops, we designed a prompt that you could use. So as an organization, as Snook, as Policy Lab, we're putting climate at the forefront of everything we do. It's something we want to understand in terms of where you're at too. Do you want to explore it together? I dare you to maybe bring that up in a topic of conversation. And again, record what happens, feed it back to the community, and let's see what we can do together. So again, there are other questions that we've brainstormed. These might be more applicable. Again, these are all in the Trello, which we hope you can gain access to and share. But this is basically where we're starting, and then we're building up from there. But we've basically outlined the design process at a very high level, from commissioning to project scoping, all the way through to implementation and measurement, and actually prototyping ways in which we can bring the environment and the climate into that at every stage, and trying to build those up into valuable tools and processes that we hope that you can all apply to your practice tomorrow.
Cool. So another thing that we did at the meetup at Live Work, which was the second one we did, if anyone was there, was it was more a piece around the kind of community that we wanted to build, as well as the work that we were doing. So we kind of brainstormed a manifesto based on people's kind of hopes and fears of what this group might or could achieve who were there in the room. Again, it was all kind of parked on Trello as well, so people could add to it. And it's kind of what you might expect, but we just thought it was an important thing to do to really acknowledge where we were as a group of people. So again, like we said, we wanted it to be kind of not a talk shop, a community that kind of did stuff. And we wanted to kind of build the confidence. We found that lots of people who were there really weren't sure what they should do, or they didn't know what they didn't know kind of the science, or they weren't quite sure. So it was building that confidence within the group, and that speaks to kind of the point top right as well, the importance of collaborating with other sectors and other communities who are also kind of growing their knowledge or might be way ahead as well, and working with them and being reflective as well. So it's kind of like any normal design practice, really, right? So you reflect on what you're doing, build up that evidence, and then share back as well to our community and other communities. That piece about collaboration is really key.
And what we're learning, I think we're learning a lot. And this is maybe just 4 points out of a long list of what's going on in my head at the moment. But basically, we're learning that different sectors use similar processes and methods, but contextualize them differently. So you might be doing a project on university catering, and their understanding of this problem is much different than if you were redesigning a service, I don't know, based on food poverty. A network needs to be self-running. I think this is something that Becky and I are certainly reflecting on, in terms of we're doing this a little bit as a side hustle and trying to bring it into our own organizations, but what does it mean to be self-running? Who runs it? How do we pass that off? And importantly, how do we make it so it's not owned by one agency or one individual? Fundamentally, the way that we scope projects, relate with clients, and put together briefs seems to be where change needs to happen most. And I think maybe a lot of us can recognize, if we're fortunate enough to be briefed into design around some of these more systemic issues, that doing that within a 3-month project plan feels a little bit narrow, a little bit difficult. And how do we actually start to think about the way that we commission, so we're doing this rightly and justly, so we can acknowledge that it's as much of a social justice issue as it is an environmental one. And I think there's minimal viable knowledge that we have to build across the service design industry. We've had a lot of designers say, I'm not comfortable talking about this, I don't know enough, I'm not a scientist, I don't know about what you mean when you say carbon credits or anything of that sort. So how do we support each other to build enough knowledge where we can go and talk to clients about this sort of stuff and actually influence our practice in that way? And we hope that this community can be a means by which we do that.
And I guess, one of the biggest points we've learned is that this has got to be a movement that involves everyone. It has been kind of spearheaded by Snook, which is fantastic, but to make it sustainable and to make it useful as well, we just want to give a nod to some of the organisations that have been involved so far. It's quite diverse, so education, policy, agencies, but also there's a bunch of students and freelancers that are all mixed in there as well. So it's a really wide community, and I guess that's why we're here this evening as well. We wanted to build that and invite more people into the conversation.
So what's next? I guess you're what's next, because we want you to join this, and maybe some of you have already actually applied some of what we're trying to do in your projects. And what you can do is actually just start to talk about the climate. Talk about it with your friends, talk about it with your flatmates, talk about it with your family. importantly, talk about it with your colleagues. How do you bring it into your own workplace? And how do you bring it into the projects that you're commissioned to do? Join the movement. It's an open one. Promote the movement. Tell your colleagues, again, apply the practice, and this is actually the really important part, is test things out, take something from the Trello board, which I'll show you in a minute, apply it, build us a case study so we can share it with the wider community, even if it didn't go according to plan. And I think importantly for all of this stuff is to stay hopeful. I think certainly for me, the climate crisis can seem really overwhelming. My emotions can fluctuate very quickly throughout a day when I come actually to stop and think about it. But what I think and what I hope this movement can be is a mechanism by which we kind of can prop each other up and really interrogate how we think design can contribute to confronting this. Because I think we have a lot of skills, not only just in our design practice, but as our means of facilitation, communication, storytelling, which is all really imperative in order for us to confront this. So I want this movement to be one where it's optimistic, not pessimistic, not where we see the problems as too big, but ones that we can actually challenge, and I think we'll be more successful again if we do it together. So that's kind of what we came here to speak about tonight. And I think we want to leave more room for questions than rattle on about it. I will bring up the Trello board just so you can see a little bit, and I'm not, oh, where did that go? I don't know how that works, sorry. We're not convinced that the Trello is the best way to organize this information, but this is what we're doing with it at the moment. Maybe we can share a link to it through Service Lab and they can share it. Is it not coming up? We'll share a link. Okay, we'll share a link later. It's there. Tools are there, links are there, documents are there. And we're really encouraging people to comment on that Trello board and actually get the community moving through that. And then use the hashtag. So if you are experimenting with stuff or have case studies of your own, please share them because we've got a lot to learn, but it's better to learn it together. So that's us.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much. I'll open up to a few questions straight away over here.
Okay, sure. Hi, my name's Rubiya Senroy. I work for Deloitte Digital as an experience strategist, but actually my academic background's in climate change, even though it's like a decade old, over a decade old. But basically, I'm in a position where I'm trying to find some tools and very practical tools and assets that we can use in consulting in service design to bring climate change to the forefront. So bearing in mind that we need to sort of recognise not only the scientific but economical, political, social impacts of climate change in the work that we do you have any, sorry to put you on the spot, I guess, but a couple of really practical examples of how you've brought climate change to the forefront with clients?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think in my practice, it's actually just been like making sure that sustainability representatives are at key meetings in the process so they can actually start to impart wisdom on the things that we're designing in terms of the business case and how it, so that's maybe one practical example, like asking people if they have a sustainability rep. If they don't, why not? And actually being a little bit feisty with that and inviting them in. I don't know if you've got other examples.
I guess I'm not really in a kind of client situation, and I think from the community there'll probably be like more stuff coming. I feel like from our last meetup at LiveWork, there were definitely like people who perhaps haven't stuck stuff on the Trello board but have got like more experience than us. We're just kind of convening people. From my own experience, I suppose in government, I've tried to sometimes it seems futile, kind of dropping these little seeds, but before Policy Lab, I was working at the Ministry for Housing, Community and Local Government in their local digital team, and I just took the opportunity at one of our weekly stand-ups to show 4 slides on digital carbon footprints and kind of just dropped that seed and then wrote something about it on Medium, and it just seems to have got people talking in that community. Now GDS is starting to calculate their digital carbon footprint, which is great. So I think never underestimate, you never know who's watching in a good way. So it's great, it's good to make that space, to give other people permission to start talking about it, because you don't know, they might have be in a different position where they can then take that further. So I think, staying hopeful and dropping those seeds, I think.
The dropping the seeds is actually kind of where we're at. It's nice to imagine that we will have some really fancy usable tools, and some agencies do, which are on the Trello, but have I said that I've applied those in my practice? Not yet. I'm keen to explore that. And I think this is, an open reflection about where we're at in terms of our practice, is that actually just incorporating it as a conversation seems to be the means at which the moment in which we're moving the dial. But what we're hoping to do with this movement over time is actually move practice in a way where it becomes just an integral part. But I wish I had more examples in my pocket to be like, and then I did this, and then I did this. But we're not there yet.
But it sounds like you're in a great position to test some stuff out as well. So,
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Sorry, I always have to ask a question. I know, obviously, Lucy, you work for a consultancy, so you're talking a lot from a kind of, hi, I'm Emma, I work for Addiction, drug and alcohol service thing, charity, that's the word. It's late, I'm tired. Lucy, you're talking a lot from a kind of consultancy perspective because you have clients, and I know, Becky, you work in government. I'm just wondering, have you had much involvement from the kind of charity or local government sector from the perspective of kind of influencing kind of service commissioning and kind of what kind of levers or things we might be able to do as, I'm a service designer working in-house in a charity as opposed to working with clients. So I wonder if you've kind of touched on that side of it. I noticed you had citizens advice on your kind of board.
I think it's a perspective that we're really missing, and one that I actually tried to write a scenario about the other day and I couldn't. Local government, I think, is slightly different because many have called a climate emergency, and now they're like, now what? And actually, service design is a really good mechanism to turn plans into action, but they don't necessarily, I would argue, they don't necessarily know how to commission that yet. So they're starting with things like citizens' assemblies, and which we can run as service designers and organize and facilitate. I know FutureGov have done that. But in terms of like actually going out and doing what we do and research and actually building interventions, I don't know of any agency that's necessarily being commissioned to do that yet, because I feel like local government is stuck themselves. And this is just endemic of where I think everybody's at with the climate. Like, okay, we recognize there's a massive problem, but we don't know how to do it. And I think we all have responsibilities to and I'm calling myself out here to kind of get educated, because my worry in being commissioned is that it becomes a talking shop, and also might not necessarily address some of the social justice issues that, if we don't get it right, risks widening the inequality gap that we already have. And I think there's a real risk there that we might design interventions that suit X part of the community, but actually leave those that are most affected out of the conversation and out of the design. And I don't have any answers for that yet. I don't have any answers probably for a lot of these questions because this is so early on, other than like a will and a drive to try and address it. But I think the charity sector, and specifically from the internal commissioning side, even in my head, I'm like, okay, drug and alcohol, and like, what does that have to do with the environment? But actually, it's people, right? And we live in the environment, and these are some of the most vulnerable people who might be pushed out to areas of cities that are more likely to be polluted or at risk of flooding, or not have green space that might actually help their mental health, which might enable them to recover from drug and alcohol addiction a little bit more effectively. So I think why this problem is so big is because it touches on everything. And I don't know how to design that in that way yet. And I'm actually just hoping that together we can figure it out. But I think it's a really good question. So if anybody does work in a charity, Emma, maybe you could come and join us and help us figure it out, because I don't know. But I think any commissioning, and I think commissioning is so we had a couple funders in the room in one of our workshops, and that to me, if a commissioner put, how are you going to incorporate, or how are you going to think about the environment if we commission you to do this project, is a really good place to start.
Exactly. I'm happy to get involved from a charity perspective, but I think commissioners and procurement are kind of people that you need in the room.
Yeah. So if any of you are here or know of anyone.
Is there any more burning questions, or are you happy to come and have a further chat with these two after we wrap? I'm seeing some nods. We know it's a bit late. Another massive round of applause for these two. Thank you so much.